Good morning, and thank you again for joining Elwyn's little reading corner. I appreciate your time. And today we'll read Elves and The Shoemaker, and the author looks the Grimm. So let's go ahead, open up to page 328. The Elves and the Shoemaker. There was once a shoemaker who thought no fault of his own had become so poor that at last he only had leather enough to make one last pair of shoes. So in the evening he cut out the shoes which he intended to begin the next very morning. And since he had a good consensus, he laid down quietly. Then he said a prayer and fell fast asleep. In the morning he was preparing to sit down to work when he looked over and stood there and shoes all finished on his table. He was astonished that he didn't know what to say. He took his shoes into his hands and examined them from inside out, and they were so neatly made, not a stitch out of place, showing that they were all done in such master hands. Very soon the customer came and became the shoes, placed them so much he paid more than the ordinary price for them. With this money, the shoemaker was able to purchase more leather for 2 more shoes. He cut them out in the evening, and the next day he was about to work, all refreshed and encouraged, and by then no need for him to work, for 2 more pair of shoes sat beautifully finished on the table. Presently customers came in who paid him so well he was able to buy 4 more pair of shoes. Then the following morning he found 4 more pair of finished shoes and went on. What he cut out that evening was finished in the morning. So he soon in comfort circumstances again, at the last becoming really prosperous. One evening, not long before Christmas, the shoemaker said to his wife, "What do you think of staying up all night to see what this leads to and who are our helping hands?" The wife liked the idea and was so enlightened. They lit candles and hid themselves in the corner of the room. They hid behind the clothes which were hanging there. At midnight came 2 little men who sat down by the shoemaker table, took up work which was cut out, and set to work so nimble, stitching, sewing, and hammering with all their little fingers that the shoemaker could not take his eyes off them. They did not stop till everything was finished perfectly. The shoes stood ready on the table, and then they ran quickly and quietly out. The next day the wife said to her husband, "The little men have made them so rich that they must show them how grateful they were. They must be so frozen for the little clothing they had on, running about and helping them in such a great way. I'll tell you what we can do. We'll make all the little shirts and the coats and the vests and the trousers with the knitting and the stockings. We shall make for each one of them and a pair of shoes." The shoemaker was so pleased with the plan, and on Christmas Eve, when everything was ready, they laid out the presents on the table instead of the usual work. But there was no leather to be seen, only these charming little clothes. At first they were astonished and then perfectly delighted. With the greatest speed, they put on this smoothing down pretty clothing and singing, "Now we are boys of fine to see. Why should we no longer cobblers be?" Then they danced and skipped and leaped all over the chairs and benches, and at least they danced right out the door. From the time on, they came no more. But the shoemaker proposed, as long as they live and succeeded, all is undertaking. And that is the ending of our Elves and the Shoemaker. And thank you very much for joining me for this reading corner today.